When the Jackson 5 arrived at Motown in 1968, the world was told Diana Ross had discovered them. It was a powerful narrative, and an easy one to promote. Behind it were Chicago nightclubs, key industry figures, and a chain of events that rarely get mentioned. The truth is more layered, and far more interesting. Concurrent with their success with Steeltown Records, the Jackson 5 also performed for the amateur show at the Apollo Theater in New York. Most black artists dreamed of performing there. Competing in the Apollo's prestigious Superdog contest, one of its highest honors, the Jackson 5 came out on top. After their win, Joseph Jackson began working part-time to devote more time to his sons' careers. It was a gamble, but it paid off quickly. The group soon earned $600 per performance. In May of 1968, Joseph would meet a lawyer named Richard Aarons, and he would ask Richard to help manage his sons. 2 months later, the Jackson 5 would perform at the Regal Theater in Chicago as part of the Battle of the Groups. The Jackson 5 had already performed at the venue on numerous occasions, but this time was different because they got to join a bill which featured some of the most popular artists at the time, including Gladys Knight. Starting out her career at the age of 12, she could understand what it was like for the Jackson 5. At this stage, Gladys Knight and the Pips were signed to Motown and were successful with their song, "I Heard It Through the Grapevine."
I met the Jacksons at the Regal Theater in Chicago. They were just children, actually, and I heard them before I saw them, and I jumped up and I said, "Who is that?" They were rehearsing to do a talent show, and I ran to the banister to try to see who it was, and their father brought them up after their rehearsal, and I got a chance to meet them. Amazing family.
When the Pips told me who they were, I said, "We need to do something about that. I know they're here for the talent show, and if they win, they'll have a leg up." The Pips said I should call Motown and get in touch with Berry Gordy. I said, "I don't think they're going to listen to us." I called the company but was told Mr. Gordy was busy. Nobody ever called back. We kept telling people about them, but nobody ever came to see them. Other artists who saw the Jacksons knew what a phenomenon they were. Gladys Knight. Weldon Arthur McDougall, who would later become Motown's East Coast head of record promotion, was another overlooked link in the Jackson 5's path to Detroit. While preparing a VIP suite for the arrival of Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers at Chicago's High Chaparral Club, McDougall heard some shouting. Seeing the Jackson 5 perform on stage, he was impressed. He was introduced to Joseph Jackson by the venue's manager. And Joe said, "Hey man, we want to be on Motown." McDougall explained he had no way of making that happen, so Joe asked, "Could you introduce me to someone at Motown?" This is where Bobby Taylor himself comes in. While rehearsing at the Apollo, Taylor asked McDougall to stop by because he had a surprise. The Jackson 5 were now on the bill. Weldon had never seen things move so quickly for a group that didn't yet have an album and were still unknown. Taylor would later insist he took special interest in the Jackson brothers after advice from Marshall Thompson, one of the Regal Theater managers, who had taken him aside and told him the Jackson 5 were a group to watch out for. After seeing their performance, Taylor was impressed enough to contact Ralph Seltzer, who was head of Motown's creative department and legal division, to acquire an audition for the young brothers. I had some doubts. Creative considerations aside, I had concerns about their age and the way they would change when they grew older, in terms of their appearance and their voices. But there was so much excitement about them from Bobby, I finally told him to bring them on to Detroit. Bobby Taylor and the Vancouvers were an interracial Canadian group that were signed to Motown at the time they met the Jackson 5. Their first single, "Does Your Mama Know About Me?" was a top 30 pop and top 5 R&B hit in 1968, co-written by guitarist Tommy Chong, years before his time with Cheech and Chong. Jermaine Jackson would perform a cover of this song for his sophomore album Come Into My Life, and his brothers would perform backing vocals. Bobby Taylor was a young guy, and he had an outgoing personality. He used to joke with us a lot. He would say, "I'm going to take your asses to Barry. He's going to hear y'all this time. Barry's got to see this." Meanwhile, we had other shows to do. We were playing the Apollo again, and we were asked to stay over in New York to do David Frost's show. That was important because we would be seen by the whole country. Tito Jackson.
I was headlining a show in Chicago, Illinois, and it was at the Regal Theater, And in those days, that's what we did, theaters. There were no big jobs like there are now. We would work from 9 a.m. in the morning until 12 midnight. And these little kids were doing the same thing. So, as I walked in at the half meaning a half an hour before it was time for us to go on. And it was a time when only the headliners did more than 2 songs. Because we do a complete show, then a movie, cartoon, and then a show, movie, cartoon, and it kept on all day, 10 straight days. So, one of the Shy-Lights, the leader of the Shy-Lights, Marshall Thompson, Marshall asked me to go and look at this kid that was on stage at the time I walked in. And I went up there, and that was this little bitty guy about like that. And he was spinning around like James Brown. Ooh, hey, ooh. I said, dang. I said, send him up to the dressing room. He stayed with me 10 straight days. He never left me except when he was on stage or when I was on stage. During the interim, he would go to sleep in my lap. His brother Marlon would go to sleep in my partner Tommy Chong's lap. You know, Tommy Chong from Cheech and Chong. And I asked him at the end, how'd you like to go to Motown?
Bobby Taylor convinced Joseph to take his sons to Motown Records in Detroit instead of going to New York. If the boys got Motown's attention, then their audition would be forwarded to Berry Gordy in Los Angeles for his approval. While the Jackson 5 had been excited to perform for the television show in New York and had been disappointed that Joseph had canceled it, everything changed once they discovered they were going to be auditioning for Motown Records. Right after the Chicago gig, Bobby invited the Jackson 5 to live in his apartment in Detroit. They went directly from Chicago to Detroit. Bobby spoke to Motown and finally got them an audition. Joe and Bobby came to me to look at the contract because I was the only white guy they knew. Joe handed me the contract and let me look at it. I said, "It's just for 7 years. You can't go wrong in 7 years." Tommy Chong. Bobby Taylor worked very hard to earn recognition for discovering the Jackson 5. Even harder than he did for his own group. His role in discovering the group was largely overshadowed once Motown chose to credit Diana Ross as the face of their discovery. Taylor began working closely with the group in September 1968, even housing the brothers in his Detroit apartment, where they slept on cots and the floor. Bobby was a co-producer on their debut album Diana Ross Presents the Jackson 5, and did uncredited work on the ABC album and its singles. They recorded 15 songs together, most of which would surface on various albums later in their career. Taylor would go on to say he wasn't paid for these sessions. Despite his relationship with the Jackson 5, Berry Gordy would insist to Taylor that the boys wouldn't remember him as they grew to become more famous. Gordy couldn't have been more wrong, as the Jackson family would regularly reference the work that Bobby Taylor did for them. Sure, I would have liked the recognition for having discovered the Jackson 5, but recognition don't pay the bills. Bobby Taylor. By September 1970, the Jackson 5 were already an established group at Motown. Weldon McDougall was photographing the Jackson 5 during major appearances, including the World Series. In February 1985, he published the Michael Jackson Scrapbook, filled with early images of the brothers. Michael and Tito often asked McDougall to take photos of them. Michael treasured the scrapbook, though he rarely let anyone touch it for fear it might be damaged. So how did Motown legend Diana Ross enter the fold? Motown's official story claimed Diana Ross discovered them at Gilroy Stadium in September 1968. In reality, the Jackson 5 had already signed their contract, and Ross was in Los Angeles, rehearsing with the Supremes. The following year, the group would meet Diana for the first time when Gordy had them perform at her birthday party. On August 11th, the same day their Motown contract was finalized, the Jackson 5 were introduced to the public at the Daisy, an exclusive private club. Over 300 guests arrived to see Diana Ross introduce them, and the audience was told that not only did she discover the young brothers, But Michael was 8 years old, though he was nearly 11. But it made for good press, and this narrative would continue for some time until Michael grew older. It was at this event that Michael would meet Bob Jones, a Motown public relations manager who would eventually work with Michael for many years during his solo career. 5 days later, the Jackson 5 would be the opening act for the Supremes in Los Angeles. By October, when Joseph and his sons moved to Los Angeles, it was decided that Michael would live with Diana Ross, while the rest moved through different hotels, cementing Michael and Diana's close friendship. Diana took an active interest in helping Michael build his career by teaching him to paint and putting herself in charge of his education. It was a calculated thing. I wanted him to be around her. People think it was an accident that he stayed there. It wasn't. I wanted Diana to teach him whatever she could. Diana's a very influential person. I knew that Michael would pick up something just by being around her. Diana had said that he sort of reminded her of herself at age 11. Michael was anxious and interested, as well as talented, like Diana was when I first met her. She was 16 then. I asked her if she minded, and she didn't. She wanted him around. It was good for her to have someone else besides herself to think about. It was just for 4 weeks, the month of October. Berry Gordy. Diana Ross would also introduce the Jackson 5 on October 18, 1969, during the Hollywood Palace. Introducing the band as Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5, this would enrage Joseph as he felt this was a family group and that Michael shouldn't be introduced as the lead singer. But this wouldn't matter, as Michael's talent and stage presence would instantly prove to the public what his role in the band was. When the Jackson 5's debut album was released in December 1969, it came with a contingency that Diana's name would appear at the bottom of the record, giving her credit for discovering the group. Diana Ross would be seen as the fairy godmother for the Jackson 5, particularly for Michael. The story that Diana Ross discovered, the Jackson 5, wasn't entirely fabricated, but it was carefully shaped. Motown understood the power of presentation. The story they came up with was easier to market than a complex chain of club performances, chance encounters, and industry persistence. Without Gladys Knight speaking up after seeing them in Chicago, without Bobby Taylor's advocacy, without Weldon McDougall's early support, the Detroit audition may never have happened. But once the contract was signed, the narrative shifted. Diana Ross became the symbol of their arrival, and for decades, that version became the official history. The reality, as is often the case in music, was far more collaborative.